This man goes by Fred, and he works as a journalist in the US. To write his articles, Fred currently poses as a supporter of a Nazi organization, but his true identity was found out due to his peculiar behavior. He was also observed recording everyone's conversations there. Fortunately, he was able to get away by jumping out of the window before he was badly hurt. A woman named Charlotte was having a conversation with the president at the White House the following day. Her title was Foreign Affairs Minister. The president grinned and responded that he didn't want to be nominated in the following year's presidential election when she inquired about his plans. Instead, because of her excellent work thus far, he nominated her to run for president in his stead. The president had no doubts about her ability to lead this nation. The president even claimed to have planned every aspect of Charlotte's campaign. She was very happy to hear the news just now because it meant she could now finally realize her dream of becoming US president had come true. Charlotte began meeting with the campaign team leader a few days later. The campaign team leader informed her during that meeting that the public would perceive her as unmarried, which would damage her reputation. She recommended that she speak with the Prime Minister of Canada, and Charlotte agreed to do so in order to ensure the campaign's success. However, Fred's boss told him that the company had been sold to a rival when he had just arrived at his office to give over the results of the recording at the Nazi gathering yesterday. Fred was furious and chose to step down after learning that, as he was deeply disappointed. Fred met his friend Lance after he got back from that place. Lance invited Fred to his client's party tonight in an attempt to lift his spirits, after learning that his friend had recently quit his job. While taking in the festivities at the party, Fred happened to spot Charlotte by chance. Fred hastily fled and told Lance that Charlotte had been his first love and childhood friend, but that was in the past, and he was sure she had forgotten about him. A man who appeared to be a bodyguard suddenly walked up to them in the middle of their conversation and said that Charlotte wanted to speak with Fred. Fred was shocked to see that Charlotte still recognized him when he first met her. After that, they had a lengthy conversation recalling their pasts. Just as they were enjoying their conversation, an elderly man appeared and made fun of Charlotte. Fred, offended, confronted the elderly man as soon as he left, telling him not to treat Charlotte that way ever again, and asserting that she was not a cheap woman. Fred made another scene by falling off the stairs, but not before he was satisfied, and left. Following that incident, Fred's curious Charlotte looked up information about him and discovered that he was a writer. Charlotte was so impressed with Fred's writing after perusing a few of his incredible articles that she decided to hire him to write her speeches. Fred received a call from Maggie, Charlotte's assistant, the following day. He was invited to the office by Maggie. He met Charlotte, who gave him a detailed explanation and an offer of a very big salary. Fred accepted the job offer without asking too much because he had liked Charlotte since they were kids. That same day, Fred started work. After writing a speech for the international meeting that evening on the plane, Fred gave it to Charlotte. However, Charlotte requested that the entire speech be revised due to the excessively vulgar writing. Perplexed, Fred proposed that she read the speech he had prepared for his high school graduation. Interestingly, the speech's theme and her speech's theme coincided. Then, Charlotte was astounded to hear Fred read aloud, word for word, the entire speech. Charlotte's team raced to get ready for the evening's festivities as soon as they got to the meeting spot in the morning. Maggie arrived that evening and pointed out that various passages in Fred's speech needed to be altered before the event got underway. Fred was irritated because he didn't like the work he had put into writing, which was flawless but subject to arbitrary changes. It would be better for them to forego Fred's speech than to alter it. He was going to steal the laptop with his speech written on it. Charlotte quickly chased Fred outside after spotting him. The two of them were fighting outside. They both instantly stopped talking in the middle of the argument to marvel at the stunning aurora borealis in the night sky. As soon as things had calmed down, Charlotte said that she had only had a brief opportunity to hear the words of the slot, and that she too wanted to read Fred's exquisite writing in its entirety, without being edited. Fred gave in at last, and happily, everything went well with the event that evening. Fred apologized for the issues from last night on the plane the following day. Following their reconciliation, they talked about their shared interests, and since the incident yesterday, they have become closer. Days went by, and they continued to work together, travel together, and even in their spare time, Charlotte would always invite Fred over to watch movies at her house. That is, until one evening, while Fred and Charlotte were sitting down to write a new speech, the place was unexpectedly broken into. Fortunately, they made it out alive. Charlotte tried to calm Fred down while she was hiding in a warehouse. As a public servant, she explained, such kinds of things happened frequently, and Fred would eventually be able to adjust. They talked and reminisced while they waited for assistance. Swept away by the mood, Fred ventured to say what was on his mind. Charlotte, it turned out, was fond of him too. Following the heated exchange that evening, they began dating in earnest. Charlotte and his team took a helicopter to Argentina early in the morning. Maggie cautioned Fred that night at the venue not to get too close to Charlotte because Charlotte's reputation might suffer if people learned about their relationship. Fred said nothing at all after hearing that. Fred kept his distance from Charlotte during the party, thinking about what Maggie had said earlier, but he became envious when he saw her dancing with another man. When the dancing was over, Fred escorted Charlotte into the kitchen in silence. After that, he turned on some music on his phone and asked Charlotte to dance. During an online meeting the following day at work, the president requested Charlotte to scrap the idea of protecting forests because it would negatively impact a lot of business owners. Charlotte had just told Fred about the president's request after the meeting. She couldn't decide whether to grant the president's request, who had helped to nominate her for president, or to grant it and allow the forests to continue to be harmed by the unrelenting exploitation of them by money-hungry businessmen. Tired of the issue, Charlotte asked Fred to the club as a way to let out her frustration. While they were savoring the moment, Charlotte was notified by one of the bodyguards that the U.S. military required her assistance in negotiations. She was extremely inebriated when she heard that, but she still had to leave. When the general arrived at the headquarters, he announced that a terrorist was holding a pilot hostage. In an attempt to maintain her composure, Charlotte bargained with the terrorists while smoking. Fortunately, through heart-to-heart communication, Charlotte persuaded the terrorists to release the pilot. Maggie suggested that it would be best for Charlotte to end her relationship with Fred a few days later. While she was working at the office, Maggie was concerned that her reputation might suffer if Charlotte was discovered. She was not the kind of woman that a lowly man like Fred deserved. Feeling enraged, Charlotte requested that she refrain from meddling in her private affairs. She declared that she would stay with Fred no matter what. Maggie was at a loss for words, and could only remain silent upon hearing that. She kept thinking about what Maggie had said earlier that evening at Charlotte's house. In the midst of her perplexity, she saw a girl on TV who claimed to admire Charlotte and wish for her to become U.S. president. That struck a chord with Charlotte. In a meeting the following day, the president and a wealthy businessman requested that Charlotte remove her suggestion that during the presidential campaign, forests should be protected because they were working on a large project that required the use of forest land. The businessman, who was aware of Charlotte's intransigence, even threatened to have the video posted online if Charlotte didn't comply, and he even showed her recorded proof of their relationship. Charlotte had no choice but to grant their request. She met Fred after the meeting and informed him of the threat. Fred initially made an effort to calm her down, but he was disappointed to learn that she had granted their request and consented to the destruction of the forest. The two fought and pointed fingers at one another until they eventually decided the relationship could not go on and ended it. Fred told Lance everything after their breakup. He felt bad for Charlotte because she was an official and ought to have thought through the consequences of destroying the forest. She was prepared to allow harm to come to nature, simply to maintain her status. Reassuring him that life in politics is not like everyday life, Lance pointed out that things were not as cut and dry as they appeared. Understanding, rather than right and wrong, was what mattered most. Fred stayed silent and was unable to respond to that explanation. Fred finally had the courage to call Charlotte because he was so desperate. He expressed regret for being egotistical and misinterpreting her role. He told her how much he missed her and that he would do anything to make their relationship closer again, but Charlotte just remained silent and didn't say anything. Charlotte couldn't help but think of Fred the following day while traveling to the campaign venue by plane. Upon reaching the campaign site, Charlotte went straight up to the platform to address her supporters. However, in the midst of her speech, she broke down in tears and apologized for not being a suitable presidential candidate. She then took a risk and revealed to the public her relationship with Fred, a straightforward man who did nothing wrong but was forced into the harsh world of politics, as well as all of the president's corruption. She hinted that a scandalous video of her and Fred could potentially surface online shortly. Everyone was shocked to hear the confession just now. Following the speech, Charlotte exited the stage, but Fred and Lance hurried to find her at the bar after watching the speech on TV. Charlotte's scandal video went viral on the internet as a result of her opposition to the president, but Fred didn't seem to care that it was getting out there. Finding the woman he loved the most was the most crucial thing. Because the story had gone viral, reporters had come after him when he got to the campaign site, but he didn't waver and kept searching for Charlotte. When he got home in the evening, he was surprised to see Charlotte waiting for him inside. She said she missed him and apologized. Thought she could be a strong woman her entire life. She was broken and yearned for the one person she truly loved. For Fred's sake, she had made up her mind to sacrifice her job. Fred was moved to hear that, and the two eventually reconciled after expressing their affections for one another. Lance informed them that the reporters were waiting for them outside for an interview in the middle of their intimacy. Fred and Charlotte attempted to support one another before deciding to walk out in front of the throng. When Charlotte proudly introduced Fred as her boyfriend, all the journalists in attendance cheered happily to support the two of them, rather than being inundated with criticism. Following the election a few months later, it became evident that Charlotte had been successful in capturing the public's affection and was formally sworn in as the next president of the United States. Fred had also been married to her. During the interview, Fred boldly declared that he would strive to be the average man who consistently gives his all for his beloved president, despite the fact that he was just an ordinary man.